When 17th century settlers sailed into the Chesapeake Bay and settled along the James River, they found a world already ordered by native tribes and traversed by native trails. The lower Appomattox River area, seen here, was the home of the Appomattox tribe and the focus of an extensive pre-existing native trading system. These paths and river crossings were adopted by the colonists for purposes of expanding commerce and transportation. The tract of land known as Conjurer's Neck, located at the mouth of Swift Creek, had been the site of native settlements for centuries. Its name suggests that it may have housed sacred structures at the time of first contact with Europeans. These structures were the focus of activities of the native priests, who were called Conjurers by the English. The prehistoric archaeological remains of an ancient settlement have been partially excavated near the river.
Well, in the prehistoric period, about 1,000 years ago, we had a small settlement of Native Americans that lived down here on this first terrace. They would have had their dwellings, all the tools they needed for daily life, their bows and arrows, spears, grinding implements, pottery.
As English settlement advanced and the native inhabitants receded into the interior, trading posts were set up along the lower Appomattox River. These served the Occoneechee Trail, which provided access at first to the fur trade, and later to tobacco from inland farms. One of those traders was Richard Kennon, a successful merchant and importer from London. He settled as a merchant before 1678 at the important port of Bermuda Hundred, founded by the British Crown at the confluence of the James and the Appomattox rivers. Richard Kennon adapted to life in the harsh conditions at Bermuda Hundred. He married Elizabeth Worsham, daughter of a neighboring family. He acquired nearly 3,000 acres on the north side of the Appomattox River, including his home place, known as Conjurer's Neck. He was elected a representative of Henrico County in the governing House of Burgesses at Jamestown. After Richard Kennon's death in 1690, his widow Elizabeth managed the family businesses, including a ferry across the Appomattox River. She conveyed the tract known as Conjurer's Neck to her eldest son, William, in 1710. William was active in local politics and military affairs. Colonel William Byrd held a review of the local troops in October of 1711. He organized competitions for the soldiers under his command, including foot races and fighting with cudgels. William Kennon, then about 25 years old, was judged the best wrestler at the event. Before he died in about 1741, William Kennon directed that 400 acres and a grist mill on the Appomattox River be given to his son Richard. A map of 1751 shows the house at the confluence of Swift Creek and the Appomattox River. The second Richard Kennon was more prominent than his father. He made trips to Williamsburg repeatedly between 1738 and 1755, representing Charles City County in the House of Burgesses. Richard Kennon and his wife Anne Hunt were likely responsible for the construction of the impressive brick dwelling at Conjurer's Neck. This digital reconstruction shows the house as it might have appeared originally. On the interior, each floor consisted of 2 rooms flanking a central passage. Later owners recalled that large closets opened to either side of the massive chimneys. With its fine brickwork, hipped roof, and elaborate details, the Kennons' house was the rival of many of the grandest dwellings in the colony, including the similar Ludwell Paradise House in Williamsburg, seen here. The brick is composed in Flemish bond, in which alternating long and short bricks form an elegant pattern enhanced, in this case, by the sparkling of deliberately placed brick ends coated with a shiny blue glaze acquired as part of the brick-making process. The windows and central doors are topped by splayed jack arches that help support the wall above, and the first and second floors are separated by an ornamental brick belt course. The new dwelling was so significant as a landmark that it soon became known as the Brick House, as seen in this map from 1770. The house takes part in the larger European building tradition. The architectural details were designed to remind anyone familiar with the tradition of the carved stone eaves of the temples and dwellings of ancient Rome, and of the newest buildings in Virginia, like this dwelling in nearby Petersburg. The house, seen on a late 19th century map, was the center of a prosperous plantation. It was accompanied by a number of outbuildings, probably including slave dwellings, a kitchen, and a smokehouse. The domestic and agricultural labor was provided by enslaved workers who expended their energy to support the income and elegance of the Kennons' grand house. Virginia planters like Richard Kennon laid out terraced gardens that linked the house and the water. The gardens at the Kennons' house were likely ornamented with walks, planted with flowers and vegetables, and protected by wooden paling fences. The tall tree boxwoods near the house are survivors of a 19th century landscape plan. Archaeologist Christopher Stevenson directed an investigation in 2002 to determine the extent of subsurface remains. The tests revealed that the site is rich with information about the lives of the Kennon family and their enslaved workers.
We started doing archaeology at the Kennon house because people wanted to know what the long-term kind of architectural trajectory of that house was, what changes were made over time. And so we investigated the area in the immediate vicinity of the house, probably within 20 or 30 feet, to look at, because that's where the clues about the rebuilding, episodes of rebuilding would be. In the area right around the house, we found evidence of a major Indian occupation, but then we also found evidence dating to the historic period where there was this large pit that contained the bricks from the house, the portions that burned. And we found maybe a floor, and then we found also a large trash bin on the south side of the house that dated to the 20th century. So there was a couple hundred years of history represented there.
Objects found include fragments of household pottery, pipe stems, animal bones, and buttons. Among the most interesting artifacts was a Spanish coin called a pistarine, dating from the 1790s. At the death of Richard Kennon in 1761, he left my Conjurer's Neck in Chesterfield with all the lands thereto to his son John, in addition to a workforce of 25 slaves. John Kennon died in 1780, and the property was inherited by his sisters. Conjurer's Neck eventually passed out of Kennon family ownership and was cared for during the next century by a succession of families who maintained the old brick house and farmed the land. When the essential Confederate supply center at Petersburg developed as a major military objective toward the end of the Civil War, life at the old brick house became suddenly much more dangerous. Fort Clifton, located a quarter-mile to the south, was the city's principal defense against an attack by warships along the Appomattox River and Swift Creek. On May 9, 1864, 5 Federal gunboats steamed up the river to shell the fort, but were unable to break past its strong position. Beginning in the summer, the Union Army built gun emplacements across the river and began the siege of Petersburg. The ragged crew of defenders at Fort Clifton endured shot and shell until the city fell at last. Conjurer's Neck was not immune to the danger. Federal shells aimed in the direction of the old brick house had been found on its grounds. By 1877, the house belonged to the family of Robert Henry Batt. His wife later described the extensive gardens, which included royal paulownia trees, magnolias, and a half-acre rose garden. The river was an important part of the farm's productivity. Shad and herring were taken in seines in 2 prolific fisheries and prepared for market. 3 marshy areas were maintained for hunting the sora, a small rail or marsh bird. Trips to the city were made by rowboat or wagon, and steamboats regularly passed the house on the way to and from Petersburg. Catastrophe struck in 1879. The house burned, destroying the roof and interior. Owner Robert Henry Batt rebuilt the central section and added a gable roof and new chimneys, as seen here. The house was dramatically reduced in length. The central passage was now flanked on each side by a single window. Batt probably added the new frame wing at the north end and the porch across the riverfront, as seen here, at the same time. The house was acquired by Willis Comstock in 1909. The brick house served as a farm residence until 1988, when the property was sold and developed as a suburb of the city of Colonial Heights. Neighbors in the new housing development organized the old brick house foundation in 2000 to preserve the house and its unmatched archaeological resources. The interior and exterior were both in serious need of repair. The house had been unoccupied for years. Grants from the Virginia General Assembly, the Cameron Foundation, and the Guelph Trust made possible a restoration completed in 2008.